This tutorial will cover Chapter 5, how to use the MVC pattern to organize your code. The MVC pattern stands for Model View Controller. It's probably best described with this graphic. It's a coding practice or an application practice of dividing your application into three parts: the model, the view, and the controller. And as you can see from this diagram, the controller starts whenever there is a web page on the user's workstation or device. They issue an HTTP request by clicking a button or a link or something that causes the postback to occur to the web server. The first thing that it takes over is the controller, which is typically the index.php document, which, as you know, is the default document for most folders. The controller decides then, based on what comes in, how to interact with the model, and the model is almost always the interaction between the web page and the database. So you can see under the model, in our case, we've got three files: database.php, product_db.php, and category_db. The controller interacts with the model, and the model references the database, either retrieving or storing information. Once the requested information has been retrieved by the controller, it then passes control to the view to render the view, literally, of what will be returned to the user and back to the user's browser. So this completes the circle. The controller takes over initially, interacts with the model as needed to either read or update the database, and then passes any messages or rendered pages passes control to the view to render those pages and pass those back to the browser. In order to accomplish this, the developer is required to break their application down into pieces called functions. And the syntax for coding a function within a PHP program is very simple. It's just the word function followed by a function name trying to be representative of what the function is going to accomplish, followed by an optional parameter list. And so here's an example. This is a function with no parameters that returns a PDO statement object or PHP data object. The function is called getProducts because there's nothing in the parentheses. That means there's no parameters being passed. And this particular function is going to issue a global DB to make the database connection. It's going to set up a variable called query, which is going to be a simple select star from products, which is going to retrieve all the columns and all the rows from the products table, I should say. Then the DB query function is called, and the query is passed. The result set is brought back into a variable called products, and then the very end of this function takes that result set called products and returns it to the caller. So all of the rows and all of the columns, whatever results from this statement, will be passed back to the caller of this function in a result set called products. This is an example of a function with one parameter that deletes a product row and returns a count. So again, we have the word function followed by a meaningful name, in this case delete product. Now to know what product we're deleting, we pass the product ID in this variable called $product_ID. Just like before, we acquire a database connection. We code a query, in this case delete from products, where product ID equal the product ID that was passed into the function. Then we issue the database statement. In this case, the delete, unlike a select, which results in a 0 to many rows of information, the delete function only returns the number of rows that were deleted. In this case, it puts those in row count and then returns that row count to the caller. This is a function with 4 parameters that adds a product to the database. The word function, followed by the name of the function, which is add product. And we're going to pass in 4 parameters: category ID, name, description, and price. We're going to acquire a database connection. Coding the insert statement into a relational table looks like this. Insert into the table called products. The 4 columns we're going to insert data into are called category ID, product code, product name, and list price. The values that we're going to put in each of those columns is category ID, code, name, and price. And these are positional, meaning, of course, the first value goes into the first column specified here, the second value goes to the second column, and so on. Then we execute the statement. The result of an insert statement is to simply return the number of rows that were inserted, and that row count is returned to the caller of this function. To control the flow of the application from one page to the other, we'll use a header function. The PHP function for redirecting a request is called header, and then the parameter that you pass in represents the location that you would like to transfer control to. In this case, header of location is of a single dot, means with transfer control to the default document within the current directory. This means transfer control up one level from the current directory. This means down one level from the current directory and to a directory called admin. This transfers control directly to error.php, and this transfers the control to a fully qualified URL, http://www.mirac.com. Redirecting requests could look like this. Within the function for a delete, for example, if the action is equal delete, you pass the product ID, you grab the product ID from the page, put it into a local variable, you call the function delete product, and that's how you call that function, passing any parameters that are needed. Once the function has completed, control returns to the line immediately following the call. In this case, that line is header location dot, which means transfer control to the default document within the current directory. This is an example of how to redirect a request that includes a parameter. So again, using our delete action, if action is equal to the delete, we grab the product ID from the page, put it into a variable, grab the category ID from the page, put it into a variable, call the delete product function, passing product ID. Once the product has been deleted, we transfer control to the current directory, single dot, but passing with it the category ID that was retrieved from the page.